I think everyone now is in from the weight room, so we'll get started. Welcome to our town hall with our mayor and our MPP and cabinet minister. For those that don't know me, I'm Scott McCammon, president and CEO of the Milton Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. You know, throughout the pandemic and just in general terms, so the chamber is really pleased to be able to create opportunities to provide information to our members, and certainly a lot of that information comes from our political leadership. And so we are very fortunate to have our two special guests this morning. Parm Gill, of course, our MPP for Milton, and the Minister of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, and His Worship Mayor Gord Krantz, longest serving mayor in the world, I think. So with that,
thank you for that. I'm not so sure about the world, but I understand that's the case in Ontario and in the country. But thanks for that.
So just a little bit about the format for today, and then we'll get right into it. We're going to have opening comments from our two guests, and then following the opening comments, we are going to get into a Q&A. As you know, when you're registered, you have the opportunity to submit questions ahead of time. So we have those, and we will also have the chat function open. So if you think of questions along the way, please just put them into the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. If it makes sense, I'll alternate the questions. So if one is more provincial in nature, obviously Parm will answer it. And if it's municipal, then Gord. But of course, there's going to be crossover as well. So we'll give the opportunity for both of them to provide answers where appropriate. And it's going to be hard for me to see the raise your hand function in Zoom, but if I somehow miss you, then just raise your hand or wave at me, and we'll make sure we get your question in there. So with that, we'll get straight to it. And Parm, I'm going to turn to you first for opening comments.
Well, thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. Great to be with all of you once again. And I want to start off by just thanking Scott and his team for putting this on. It's always great, and everything you guys do, Scott, at your level to support our local business community. So thank you once again. And I know we're kind of leading the way when it comes to the supports that our local chamber provides to our businesses compared to some of the others. And I know a lot of other chambers look up to you guys. So thank you for that. And I'll talk a bit about, obviously, sort of the provincial scene for a few minutes, and happy to take any questions after that. You know, we all know that these past couple of years haven't been easy for anybody, and especially here in Milton included. Milton is not immune to anything that happens, obviously, whether it's in the province of Ontario or the country or outside of our borders. We had to make many sacrifices and waited a very long time to try to get back to enjoying the things that we missed. As a former small business owner myself, and I can only begin to imagine the difficulties all of our small business community have had to face over the past couple of years. Throughout this pandemic, a focus on keeping people healthy has guided every decision that our provincial government had to make. And that being said, no decision has been easy, especially over the last 2 years, for any government, regardless whether it's a municipal, whether it's a federal. And I'm proud each and every day to represent, of course, our community at Queen's Park as a part of the provincial government, and especially honored to have a seat at the cabinet table where majority of these decisions are made. And throughout this pandemic, many actually who had said that they obviously in the last provincial election didn't support our party, but appreciated our government's commitment to working together with other governments, whatever stripe of government may be, at the federal level or other provincial governments throughout our country, and including our municipal and regional partners, as we cautiously transition back to a new normal life. Our government is committed to supporting our community, our businesses, and of course, our economy. When COVID-19 first hit, our government took immediate action to support all Ontarians. We introduced many initiatives, including the Ontario Small Business Grant, which I know was worth basically $20,000 each. And we spent nearly $3 billion into that investment. And over 110,000 businesses across our province were able to take advantage of the program. Some of the other initiatives include the property tax rebates, COVID-19 emergency assistance program for small businesses. That itself included $8 million to help registered charities, customers, and small businesses with their energy bills. Other initiatives include Ontario Tourism and Travel Small Business Support Grant, Digital Main Street Program, Ontario Together Fund, which included rapid testing services and PPE, Community Building Fund, more than $46 million to support 648 nonprofit tourism, culture support, and recreation organizations. And of course, in our recent fall economic statement, we are building on this work to protect our progress made and protect our economic recovery. It is a plan that begins with our record of strong pandemic management, but also looks beyond to the kind of Ontario we all want to build. This is a plan, of course, for jobs, a plan for opportunities, and a plan to build Ontario. Our plan is for building a better and brighter future for every single Ontarian across our great province. And obviously, it starts with protecting our progress. The government has a plan to build a health and a long-term care system that delivers the quality of care for our loved ones that they deserve. And some of it includes investments like $342 million beginning in 2021 to add over 5,000 new and upskilled registered nurses, registered practical nurses, as well as 8,000 personal support workers. In addition, Ontario is investing almost $60 million beginning 2022 to hire 225 nurse practitioners in a long-term care sector. We're making additional investments, including almost $550 million over the 3 years to expand home and community care. This funding would support up to 28,000 post-acute surgical patients and 21,000 patients with complex health conditions every year. Investing over $12 million over 2 years, starting 2021-2022, to continue rapid access to existing and expanded mental health and addiction supports. Additional $72 million over 3 years to increase enforcement capacity in long-term care homes. That starts with doubling the number of long-term care inspectors across the province by 2022-2023. This will make Ontario's inspectors to long-term care homes ratio the highest in the country. The government also has a plan to build Ontario's future with shovels in the ground for highways, hospitals, housing, and of course, high-speed internet. With these investments, the government will expand our healthcare capacity, provide access to critical mineral resources in Ontario's north, and cut down on the time drivers spend in gridlock so that they can spend more time, of course, with their family, with their friends, and other loved ones. Some of the highlights include investing approximately $2.6 billion in 2021-2022 alone in support of Ontario's highway program, which features more than 580 construction, expansion, and rehabilitation projects as part of the highways program. The government is committed to funding to build and advance the Bradford bypass and, of course, Highway 413, which we made the announcement recently. And I think we can all understand the importance and the need of these highways. All of us drive along the 401, regularly, and we see the kind of congestion, normally that exists, whether it's morning, afternoon, and sometimes even on the weekend. And it's great every time now I drive by to see the progress that we're making and the expansion that's taking place. That's scheduled to complete by summer of next year. And I'm hoping that that'll help cut down some of the commute time that Miltonians and others in the region have to put up with each and every day. We're also making other investments, such as $3.7 billion beginning in 2024-2025 to build an additional 10,000 net new long-term care beds and upgrade 12,000 existing beds in long-term care settings, investing $30.2 billion over the next 10 years to build, expand, and enhance hospitals, a historic commitment to ensure people can get the care they need in their communities, and especially with our aging population in the country. I think it's extremely important for all governments to be focused on healthcare, and that's certainly what our provincial government has been focused on. Doubling the government's annual investment in Ontario's Community Infrastructure Fund program from $1 billion to nearly $2 billion over the next 5 years, providing certainty and predictability to 424 small, rural, and northern communities so they can build and repair roads, bridges, and water and wastewater infrastructure in their local communities, including investing over $63 million through CenGen program to bring fast, reliable, and affordable internet service to rural residents across our province, and including here in Milton. I always tell my colleagues at Queen's Park, everybody just assumes, of course, Milton is just part of Toronto and everyone has a reliable and high-speed internet. The reality is a significant part of my riding of Milton and the small rural part of Burlington that I represent at Queen's Park does not have a high-speed internet. In some cases, have no internet at all. So I'm proud to say that I made announcements recently, especially in the north part of Milton, in the Brookville area, Campbellville, and so forth. And some of those installations are already taking place, and people are getting connected to high-speed internet. But of course, there are many, many residents, small business and farmers outside in the rural community that don't unfortunately have access. So we are working on addressing this as well. The other item is, of course, working for workers. The government wants workers in a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. This is why the government has a plan to build up Ontario's workers by proposing to raise the minimum wage, providing funding so workers can learn the skills and attract the investments in critical minerals, automotive, manufacturing, and other industries to create good paying jobs right here locally. So part of that is proposing to increase the general minimum wage to $15 an hour effective January 1st, 2022, and investing an additional over $90 million over 3 years, starting in 2021-2022 in the skilled trade strategy. Key initiatives include creating a skilled trades career fair, as well as enhancing the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program and pre-apprenticeship training programs, proposing to extend the Ontario Job Training Tax Credit to 2022, which would provide an estimated $275 million in support to about 240,000 people, proposing a new temporary Ontario staycation tax credit. I know a lot of people that are excited about that for 2022, which would provide an estimated $270 million to help over 1.5 million families further discover Ontario. With that, I want to thank Scott and the team once again, and all of you for joining. I know you probably have other questions. Happy to take any questions. Once again, I just want to thank all of you and our entire community locally for doing their part, especially during some of the challenging times over the last 2 years. So with that, you know, my team and I are always available. We're here to help in any way we can. So, and I always say that please never hesitate to reach out to us. I'll turn it back over to you, Scott. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Parm. Very much appreciated. And Gord, if you are ready, we're going to go directly over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. And again, thanks to you and your team and the board of directors at the Chamber of Commerce. I see right now that we have roughly 32 individuals that's on with us. And I want to recognize, to the best of my knowledge right now, two of my elected colleagues, Councillor Best and Councillor Mike Fluitt, is with us there. And I see Colin just give a little wave there, and Mike is probably going to do the same now there too. So yeah, there he is. He looks as if he's in his car there, keeping track of what we do. But the reason, Scott, I'm introducing those two, and again, I speak, I believe, for the majority of council, if not council, the biggest majority of the time. And of course, I always stand to be corrected on any comments as it reflects council's position. This is the reason why I mentioned my two elected colleagues. But with me this morning, and we've been chatting about this meeting off and on for a day or two, is Dorothy, and I know Dorothy joins us, and she's a staff person here that attempts to coordinate what council gives direction. And so Dorothy's probably got a handle on it as well as most of us on where the town of Melton, you know, council and senior staff want to go. Now, Scott, if I again could back up to thank you very much for coordinating and keeping in mind right now today, we have 3 levels of government represented on this call. I represent local and regional government. And of course, Parm and his team represents provincial government. The only one that's not here today is the federal government. And I understand that. But you coordinated an effort back early on in the pandemic on coordinating those 4 levels of government. So I just don't want to dismiss the Chamber's effort on coordinating all levels of government to work with business. So that has happened. So now on with the business of hand. And I might be jumping around a little bit, but these are things that are important to me, and I believe that I speak for majority of council again on these issues. Now, I'll be touching on them to some degree. And again, when we get to the question and answers, and really what I'd be looking for is not only questions, but I'm looking for observations and opinions. And I, as one individual, don't mind being criticized for things that we do or don't do, for that matter of fact. So I look for that. So when you get feedback, and I'm sure that I speak for Parm as well, you know, if we were doing everything right, there'd be nothing for us to do. So, you know, there's the odd thing that we do not get correct, and I recognize that. So, but it's you out there in the field that recognizing that, and sometimes it has to be brought to our attention. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. So I would encourage those that are on line with us there to think about some of the things, not only, you know, that wish list. And of course, I know Santa Claus is coming in about 6 weeks. So keep in mind what Santa Claus does. You make out your list, and then Santa Claus has a look at it and say, well, I'd like to give you everything, but it ain't going to happen. You might get something. So it's not much different with us in government and those of you that are in business. And keeping in mind, you heard Parm mention before, he comes from a small business background as I do. So I understand it very, very clearly. I was in business for myself for over 20 years. So with that, and again, Scott, Milton growth strategy, and of course it's mandated by the province. And I talk about not only the region of Fulton, but I talk about the Greater Toronto area and or the Golden Horseshoe. This is where a lot of the stuff is happening. Not to dismiss Northern Ontario, far from it, or Eastern Ontario, they're critical as well. But this is where the action is in the next 20 or 30 years. So this is where a lot of our focus has to be on. we're all in this together. And in my case, we're all in this together with the region of Halton and the other 3 municipalities, Oakville, Burlington, and Halton Hills. And with that growth strategy, we do have our differences, but I think we're pretty close on coming together and, you know, seeing Halton proceed with its growth strategy. Right now, approximately the region's population is approximately 600,000 people. And probably most of you are aware, as I am, that the projection in the next 20, 30 years to 2051 is going to be $1.1 million, or million people. So we have to plan for the future. And I know Parm touched on some of the highway stuff. And of course, I know I advocate, and I'll talk a little bit about transit in a minute, but I advocate a lot of us, including myself, getting out of our cars whenever we can. But just let's assume that additional 500,000 people, if only 50% of us get out of our cars, there's still a lot of people still going to be in cars. So some of that infrastructure is really going to be needed, such as roads, expansion of water, sewers, hydro, you know, the whole bit is going to have to be put into place, because that is definitely going to happen. So that kind of sets the stage for that. Interregional transit service, and you know, whether it's on Steeles Avenue or any place else, I want to make it very clear that I'm not advocating, at least at this moment, for regional transit, which would include the 4 area municipalities. That may or may not happen sometime in the future, but at least in my opinion, there does have to be some coordination going over, you know, local municipal boundaries, and even such as whether it's into the Hamilton, Carlisle area, or whether it's into Mississauga area. We're all connected. So I see that as being a priority over the next 5, 10, 20 years. So that definitely is on my radar screen. I'm sure that I speak for a lot of my colleagues as well. One of the other things, of course, the regional official plan. I touched on it a little bit. We were, to some degree, far apart as elected people, especially at the region of Halton, on understanding one another's wants and needs. But I think that gap has closed a lot at the regional level. And I think, Scott, I really would be remiss on not mentioning Parm's help, not only for Milton, but taking in mind not only the province of Ontario, but putting together a reasonably good plan for Halton, in my opinion. So he and his elected colleagues at the provincial level has been really helpful, not only to Milton, but to Halton, and getting things into the place they're on moving forward. So that shouldn't be lost, because I'm thinking now 20 or 30 years out. Last but certainly not least for this portion of it is the CN issue, the rail hub, and how it will affect Milton. I've always been singing from the same song sheet, and everybody knows, if you don't, I'm pretty much a bottom line guy, and I think about that almighty dollar quite often. And with what CN has been proposing, on us losing the assessment that the region of Halton and the town of Milton has always thought about for those lands, and I'm talking about in excess of 1,000 acres of land, it would be dramatic in our future assessment if that was still to go ahead. And of course, keeping in mind that it is still in the courts, or will be in the courts probably for some time until all that gets all sorted out. The region of Halton has really, in my opinion, did an excellent job on taking the lead role. Not only did it affect the assessment, or would affect the assessment for Milton, but it would affect the assessment for the whole region. So in the 4 area municipalities have been solidly behind not supporting what CN is advocating there. So Scott, that kind of sets the stage, and with your permission at some point, and I know Parm is much like me, I attempt to take all the credit when things go well. Somebody else can take all the flack when it doesn't. And I know Robert works with Parm, and I know he's on the call, as well as I mentioned 2 of my elected colleagues there. So you might want to get their perspective on, because we're all in this together, and they probably got some of the points that I probably missed, as Robert maybe picked up on some of the things that I've maybe mentioned, and some of the things that Parm maybe mentioned too, that we missed in this brief 5 or 10 minute introduction. So Scott, with that, I look forward to any questions, any comments, any observations, or any opinions. So thanks, Scott.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks, Gord. Appreciate that. And just a reminder for everyone that we do have the chat function. So if you have any questions that you wanted to ask, put them in there, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Gord, I'm going to start with you. You've talked about Santa Claus.
Yep.
And you've talked about growth, and sometimes growth is a challenge for municipalities in that it's great to have the assessment growth, but you also have some infrastructure growth that then becomes a liability for the town and increases your costs. So and that can put pressure on the tax rate for not just the businesses but residential as well. So keeping Santa Claus in mind, how do you balance that, Mr. Mayor, in terms of keeping the tax rate low, but having the bag of goodies to give out?
Yeah, well, the secret to that is, and the reason why I mentioned Santa Claus, Scott, is one of the toughest things that an elected person has to say is no. It's no different than you and I as a parent on telling our children, no, it's not easy to do. I refer to it as wants and needs. It's one thing for you and I to want something, but it's another thing to need it. Now, needs is very high on my priority list, regardless of what it is. So we have to separate out the wants from the needs. And you're absolutely right. Growth is going to happen whether you want it to or whether I want it to. It's just a fact of life. It's going to happen, especially as I alluded to the GTA and the Golden Horseshoe. You can get places like, not to pick on Wawa or pick on Thunder Bay or pick on Sault Ste. Marie or pick on Cornwall. They just wished they had some of the problems that we have with growth. So it's that balancing act that we have to try and keep in mind. And again, I didn't touch much on affordable housing, but this is on a lot of our mind, including mine now. And of course, whenever we talk about, when we say, you get a building permit, we're going to charge you $60,000 or $80,000 for a building permit that incorporates some of those services that you alluded to. That's always passed on to the end user for the most part. But I'm also well aware that a small portion of that is also passed on to the present property taxpayer. And that's where growth is important on picking that up, that added assessment, especially in the industrial commercial area. And that's so critical because that's a big part of our, new 401 industrial park that, again, the Parm's so familiar with and so critical to the success of not only Milton and Halton, but the province of Ontario and this great nation of ours. So I didn't skirt around it there, Scott. I'm not afraid to say no to people. And it's pretty darn tough, I can tell you, when you have to do that, just like Santa Claus.
So Parm, I'm going to come to you shortly, but I want to come back to Gord just to expand a little bit on that, because I don't think a lot of people understand, and as business people, I'm assuming we might, but some people maybe not, in terms of residential versus commercial industrial. And I don't know what the numbers are these days, but it used to be that businesses would over contribute by about 25%. So compared to residential in terms of the demand on service. And so municipalities are always trying to maintain the ratio between residential and commercial industrial, knowing that if you've got a strong business community, that helps offset the tax increases for the residential people too. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a lesson on that?
Yeah, most definitely, Scott. The ideal that was always perceived, if you had a 60-40 balance, that'd be just ideal. Well, Milton and Halton never had the ideal situation. I think at one time we got pretty close to it. I think we were 70-30 at one point in time. And I don't know right now, and Dorothy and or Colin, or maybe even Mike can assist me there. but it's my recollection, we're probably maybe 75, 25 or in that ballpark right now. I'd prefer personally to see it up a little higher, and the importance on that industrial commercial ratio that you alluded to. So that's where that balance comes in, growth. If you're just talking about residential growth, boy, we'll be in trouble if we don't have that good industrial commercial growth, big time.
Perfect. Thank you, Gord. Before I turn to you, Parm, I just wanted to mention, I meant to do this at the beginning, that we do have an event next week scheduled with our MP, Adam Van Couverden. He wasn't able to be with us today just because of scheduling issues. But next Wednesday at lunchtime, we're doing this format with Adam. So Parm, you mentioned that you're part of cabinet now, so congratulations on that. We're very proud of that promotion for you. Now the Minister of Citizenship and Multiculturalism. And so one of our questions deals with immigration. And it's just talking about the importance of immigration for Ontario. And what do you think are the most important factors for an immigration process?
Well, thank you for that question, Scott. And once again, I'm absolutely honored to be part of the cabinet and be able to represent our community at Queen's Park as an MPP. And it's all thanks to the residents of Milton, and that's never lost on me. And to answer your question in terms of immigration, I think we all understand the importance of immigration, not just to say the town of Milton or the province, but the country. You know, this country is built on the backs of immigrants, and especially with our aging population, we need more immigration. That's no secret. But we also know, obviously, overall in general, the immigration falls under the federal government's jurisdiction, but each province does have an allocation, what we call under the provincial nominee program. So currently, Ontario has an allocation of just over 8,000 individuals that we're able to bring into the province just to fill gaps in certain professions, certain skill set that we might require. So that's what we're using. We're at the same time, we're constantly lobbying the federal government and encouraging them to raise the provincial allocation that we have here in the province of Ontario to at least double that. Ideally, we want to be able to bring in about 25,000 people each year, but what we're saying is maybe just start by doubling it's roughly 8,300 currently this year that the allocation is for the province of Ontario. But listen, immigration plays a huge role in our economy in terms of filling gaps in certain areas, certain industries, and especially right now. And I one of the main things I hear from a lot of the businesses locally and provincially is that they're unable to find workers. They're unable to find workers in certain sectors, or when it comes to bringing certain skills to the table. So it is important. It's something that we are obviously provincial level working each and every day to address, and some of the initiatives I mentioned in my remarks. When it comes to the training and the retraining and the skill traders and the investment that we're making under the Ministry of Labor with my colleague Minister McNaughton. So immigration, to answer your question, is very, very important, and it's something that we're pushing. We need more immigrants, especially we've kind of now fallen back over the last couple of years due to pandemic. Obviously, we all know that immigration numbers have gone down considerably. The individuals that would have immigrated to the country had we not been in pandemic are not there. So we really need to up our game and up our numbers over the next few years to kind of play a catch up.
Perfect. Thanks, Parm. You talked about the fall economic statement, and you gave us the highlights in that presentation. I'll come back to broadband because that's a huge issue as well. But you talked about the 580 highway projects throughout the province. And of course, we know Highway 401 through Mississauga and Milton is is currently under development. And I know in conversations with Colin Best, the Tremaine interchange is a regional issue and gets impacted by the 401 improvements. But I think we're targeting for summer of 24 for the Tremaine interchange to be open. But coming back to the 580 projects and just infrastructure generally, are there any goodies for the Milton area in terms of what some of the projects may be?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the announcement obviously made, and whether it's in the fall economic statement or in budget in general. So we have to allocate money in advance, sort of into the future, whether it's the next few years or the next 10 years, and project what we're looking to spend. And you mentioned almost 500 projects throughout the province that we're funding. It's important, I think, for any level of government to make sure our infrastructure is kept up to date, and also plan, in some cases plan ahead. We don't always have the ability to do that just with pressures, but wherever we can be able to plan ahead. You mentioned, of course, the congestion on the 401. That's another project that's, of course, funded by the provincial government, the expansion that's taking place. And it puts a smile on my face because I know at least for the next little bit, once it's completed, we will be able to spend less time in traffic. But at the same time, and the mayor also mentioned, with regards to our growth and the projected growth over the next number of years, it's only a matter of time. And that's why we need the other new highways as well, the 413 that we talked about, also talked about the Bradford bypass. Goods have to move. The reality is, as Gord mentioned, even 50% of the people that were to move into the region were to get out of their cars and into the transit system, we still have the other 50% to deal with. So we got to make sure to allow people to spend less time in sitting in traffic and gridlocks, and be able to spend more time with their family, with their loved ones, or doing other things rather than sitting on the highway as if it's a parking lot. And
both Gord, Parm, you've talked about working together and being a team in terms of government, because there is so much crossover. But sometimes families disagree, and so with 413, I know Mayor Bennett from Halton Hills was on CBC saying that the town of Halton Hills is against the 413. Gord, I wasn't sure at this point whether the town has a position.
Yes, we did there, Scott, and oddly enough, there was a vote, and I stand corrected on this, but it seemed to me it was back in about May or June. Of course, the majority at the region of Halton come out opposing the 413, and there was a resolution put forward to Milton Council on supporting that position. That position lost by a very, very close vote. It actually lost 5-4. So they did not support the region of Halton. So what that will tell you, at least the majority, just the majority, supported getting on with the 413. That's my interpretation of it. I think it's pretty accurate.
And Parm, I'm not sure if people understand the 413 under the proposed alignment or the development would connect at the 401 and the 407. So it will be kind of on the eastern end of Milton.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, all of that is still being worked out. The route hasn't been finalized, and that's all of the work and the studies that are taking place behind the scene and have been for a while. So to your point, yes, it would kind of run just sort of north of the 407. It would end up in Milton, but then go on basically through Halton Hills and through Caledon, York region, all the way touching, Highway 427 and all the way to 400 is the intention.
And Parm, I promise we come back to broadband, because that, again, as you know, that's a huge issue for Milton residents. And you talked about the successes with some of the SenGen rollout. It's hard to forecast when it will be a full rollout and when all Miltonians will have high-speed internet, but can you kind of give us a bit of a projection in terms of where we're going?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, as I mentioned, the work has already started. Overall, we are committed to investing $4 billion in rural broadband investments that the provincial government is making, which will help over 300,000 families get the connection. We've already started the work, of course, in the town of Milton, as I mentioned, made the announcement, I believe about a year ago, through the program with Sengen, and it's Mage Network actually as the service provider. So they've been working with Milford Hydro to put these small little devices on the hydro poles, so people have a wireless sort of a Wi-Fi internet access, and the connections are being provided right now. So I know that because I'm regularly in touch with Mage, Sengen, and also the residents. And I also understand, as I mentioned in my remarks, there's a significant not a lot of people understand this, part of Milton, the rural part, whether it be south, north, east, west, you name it, that are struggling for the same service. And the challenges created by COVID-19, where whether you're a student, you have to study online, and a lot of students had to do that for a period of time. Whether you're a small business owner, whether you're a farmer, this creates real challenges for individuals that had to work from home. So we've pumped in a lot of money. We're trying to get things moving. Obviously, it has been challenging. It's not as easy as flicking a switch, but the work is being done. We are starting to see results, but it is going to take a bit of time. So we're asking for a little bit of a patience. So we're really hoping over the next 3 to 5 years that we want to have over 300,000 families get the connection.
Gord, coming. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Scott, if I could be so bold, there's a couple things you heard me mention earlier on that I just might be jumping around a little wee bit, but did you have a question before I go ahead?
No, I was going to ask you if you wanted to jump in. So
yeah, okay, very good. Timing is just great. One of the things that I didn't touch on too much, Scott, was the mobility hub redevelopment. And for the most part now, I'm talking about the main Ontario Street area where the GO station is out and through that area. There's going to be a great deal of change happening in that particular area over the next 5, 10, 20 years. So, and business will probably find a lot of opportunities as to things that evolve there. So I guess what I'm saying, keep your eye on that bouncing ball, because it is going to happen for sure. And, moving ahead with development, whether we want it or not, it's going to happen. And we refer to it as the Edgerton development out there, where there'll be another 25, 35,000 people in the next 25, 30 years. And that's in the area, so people can get their head bent around that. It'll be in the area of Trafalgar Road, Britannia Road, Derry Road, in that particular area there. And if you're familiar where the CP tracks go across Trafalgar Road, that will be the hub out in that area. That's not going to happen tomorrow, not going to happen next week or next month, or maybe even next year. But Scott, it is going to happen. So, so for the business community and people in general, be aware of that, because that's part of the planning future. And I didn't mention there the Milton Education Village that's going to be so critical. And I know you and the Chamber are well aware of that. It really right now is a work in progress. And I just want to once again thank our partners at the provincial level that really made that happen. I've been dealing with this off and on now for a good 12 or 15 years. So it's going to become a reality. And I've often said a well-educated community is a very prosperous community. And I intend to keep it that way. But it's things like I'm talking about that's going to keep it that way, Scott. So it's the business community. It's going to help us, people like Parm and I, to do it. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to come back to the business opportunities around the Egerton area and the area around the Milton Mall. But I want to talk a little bit too, Gord, about the urban expansion. And I know that it's an issue in terms of the town having to get approvals to expand the urban envelope, and you know, there's not necessarily full agreement at Halton Region in terms of Milton being able to expand, but the expansion of that is critical for things like Egerton.
Most definitely, and I alluded to some of that before. And again, Parm and other people at provincial level, we've tried to emphasize how critical it is, not only to Milton, but believe it or not, to the region of Halton. And I think the province gets it. It's important to the province as well. So I think, as I mentioned, Scott, I think we're getting closer and closer to understanding not only the wants, but the needs that I alluded to with Milton, and what the region of Halton needs moving forward too. So I think we're getting pretty close to it. So, you know, and again, and I stand corrected on this, I think we'll be doing a little bit of, for the lack of a better word, chatter about that, probably this coming Wednesday at a regional meeting and a regional workshop. So I think it's getting reasonably close to being satisfied. Will everybody be totally happy? Probably not, but I think it'll be something that we probably can live with and live with reasonably well as we move forward at the region of Halton, and with the input and of course the guidance by the province.
I think the important add-on to that too, if I'm right, Mr. Mayor, is that a lot of people assume that urban expansion means that we're going to decimate the agricultural lands, and that's not the case.
Oh, far from it. One of the things that I've been advocating, and we have been advocating at the region of Halton and Milton, and I think even the province in the Greater Toronto Golden Horseshoe area, is going up instead of out. And that's the order of the day. And there's pushback on that, Scott, as well. And my elected colleagues at the local level is well aware of that. And we talk about heights. I think the highest building in Milton right now is probably, I don't know, 15 or 16 stories in that neighborhood. But we right now have approved stuff in the area of 25, 30 stories. And I'm not sure who coined that famous phrase, you ain't seen nothing yet. Get ready for the next 20 or 30 years. They're going to be the 50, 60, 70. And that's not unusual now if you get into places like Toronto, Mississauga, where they be 80 and 100. So it's going to happen in this area too. So get ready for it.
Parm, I want to come back to the fall economic statement again, and you talked about the raise in the minimum wage, and you know, I think everyone will agree that the living wage is critical to make sure that people can afford to live, work, and play properly. But a lot of businesses were caught off guard with you know, the speed of the announcement. So I'm just curious how much pushback the government has had.
Well, you know, obviously one of the things I'd say to that, Scott, is obviously like none of these decisions, unfortunately, you have to make, you know, whatever level of government are easy, but, you know, you do have to make them. I think most people will remember when we first got elected and we actually put a freeze on the minimum wage increase because we knew the situation at the time in terms of you know, the hardship or the burden on the business community, and how many jobs would be impacted by the increase. But the reality with all of the challenges right now, especially over the last almost 2 years with COVID and stuff, and with the shortage of workers we've seen, it's been challenging for everybody. So the minimum wage that we increased, that's scheduled to kick in as of January 1st, 2022, is going to $15 an hour. I know there will be certain small businesses that would be impacted. You know, their expenses will have to go up, unfortunately. But at the same time, I also know most businesses in and around Milton, you know, when you talk to them, they were already paying in excess of whether it's a 15 or over $15 an hour already anyways. but not to say that, especially in say the hospitality industry, the restaurants and so forth, would this probably be where this is going to be a biggest impact. We understand, this was not an easy decision, but the one that the government had to make. And we will continue to work with businesses that are impacted to look at ways how we can support them, not just during pandemic, but even coming out of that. So we're constantly consulting. We're constantly talking to the businesses right across the province. We actually have a ministry that's dedicated, Associate Minister of Small Businesses and Red Tape Reduction. As a matter of fact, we've eliminated millions and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of red tape and the unnecessary paperwork and other expenses that the businesses had to go through. And we continue to work in that area as well. Almost every year, we're introducing at least 2 pieces of legislation in different sessions to just combat the red tape burden on our small businesses. And we'll continue to work on that.
I think that's an important piece, and I want to come back to that too, because the province created the kind of the one window approach, the portal for businesses, because it used to be that you'd have to go to different ministries or different websites and try and figure the whole thing out for yourself. But kudos to the province for streamlining it, and maybe just elaborate on that a little bit for us, Parm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can all relate to sort of the frustration when you're being bounced around from one ministry to another, or from one department to another. This is almost one of those no-brainers. I mean, why wasn't this done before already? And not to say that, we've achieved our goal. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There's still a lot of progress that we can make. But as we all understand it, coming from sort of the small business side myself, and even in my role, it sometimes is very, very frustrating at the speed at which things move in government, and all of the different and departments and different things that you need to work with to get something done. But believe me, we're at times just as frustrated as everyone else out there. But our goal is to make it as streamlined as possible. We continue to make progress. We actually currently have a piece of legislation, another sort of a red tape reduction bill before the legislature that's being debated. We've made some progress, but there's a lot more we need to do.
I want to leave time for closing comments, and we're approaching the 1 hour mark. But before I turn to Parm and Gord for their closing comments, I just want to talk a little bit about the supports that the government have given to the business community throughout the pandemic, and how appreciative we are, not just on the financial side, but also with PPE. As we know, in the early days of the pandemic, it was hard to find masks or sanitizer, and so we worked very closely with the town and the provincial government to make sure that we created that portal for the business community to find PPE, and that's less of an issue now, but we've evolved now into the rapid test kit program, and again partnering with the town and the province to do that. In the beginning, with the rapid tests being given out from Hugh Foster Hall, we've now shifted those to being given out at the chamber boardroom, but of course the province funding the entire program. And I think the important message that, other than thanking the two of you for that, I think the important message for the listeners is that, the chambers of commerce have become a conduit for the government. There's a chamber in pretty much every municipality in Ontario, in Canada for that matter. But when the province wanted to look at a way to deploy the rapid test kits, it became very natural to use the existing chamber network. So we've been really proud to be involved in that. To date, we've given over 40,000 rapid test kits out. And I like to emphasize too that means we've protected almost 9,000 employees and their families, because that, if we can capture any positive cases and send them for the full PCR test and any isolation that may have to happen after that, that's important. So thank you both for participating in that and funding it to a great extent.
Scott, if I could be so bold for just a moment, I know you're up against the clock there now, but Parm and I have, for the most part, dominated the past hour there, but I really would like to get a little wee bit of feedback from the chamber members that's on with us this morning there. Are we doing things right? Is there another area that they'd like to see us pursue? Because this is really what I'm looking for right now, and I speak on behalf of Parm.
Yeah, absolutely. If we've had questions coming in, but if anyone wants to unmute and offer any feedback, we could certainly do that.
Okay, then Scott, I'm only going to assume then, because nobody's jumped in there, that Parm and I are doing something right. Would that be a fair assumption on my part?
I think you're right, and I think it just also points to the fact that because we've run out of time, we need to do this again sometime.
Count me in.
So we really have to wrap. Parm and Gord, I want to turn to you for your closing comments, and Parm, I'll come to you first.
Oh, perfect. Well, once again, Scott, thank you to you, your team, and all of our local business community. It's obviously been an honor and a pleasure for me to work with all of you over the last 3 or so years, and just know that we're here to help you in any way we can. So please, if you have any questions, anything to do with the provincial government, sometimes it's not even the provincial government, it's the other level, we're happy to direct you or put you in touch with the right level of government or the individual, whoever can assist you. So don't be a stranger. It's been incredible. I know we've made some progress. We have a lot more to do, so we'll continue to do, and I will continue to lean on many of you for advice and for input as we move ahead. So thank you once again, and I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to doing this again in the near future. Perfect. Thanks, Parm. Gord, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. And again, I echo a lot of the sentiments that Parm just mentioned there. As everyone knows, I'm really not hard to find or to contact there. If anybody has any thoughts on this hour that we've spent together and some of the things that I touched on earlier on, I know in a general meeting like this, it's rather difficult. It might be more of just a one-on-one. So I invite and encourage any individual that if he or she's got any thoughts on the things that I touched on, please get in touch with me. Thanks, Scott.
Perfect. Thank you all for tuning in. We've also recorded this program. It will be airing on Your TV, so we thank Your TV for their support as well. And with that, we'll bring this meeting to a close. And thanks again for joining us.
Have a good one.